Hello, fellow humans! Welcome back. So today I am serving my best Sully realness because we need to talk about Monsters, Inc. Okay, this franchise has plagued me with unanswered questions for years. And so hopefully people who are a little bit more able to answer these questions will see this video and will answer some of my deep, burning questions about Monsters, Inc. and Monsters University. So before we dive in, obviously, huge spoilers for both of the movies. So if you haven't seen them, watch them, be confused, come back, and we can talk about it. Okay, so firstly, how do the other employees really feel about this change to laughter energy? Because we see one scare floor out of dozens, and the CEOs are working the front lines. Does this just mean that the workforce has been incredibly reduced because people aren't buying into the idea? I guess monsters aren't buying into the idea. I mean, the employees that are working there seem to have good morale while their bosses are behind them. But how do they actually feel? Because working in the entertainment industry in the human world doesn't necessarily mean things are going to go well for you. It's not necessarily the happiest career. And what about the former scarers? They were like these athletic superstars, and now they're like coal miners in the Midwest, unable to make a living. How are they going to deal with that? And how is the government in the Monsters universe going to respond to these out of work people? How are they going to respond to losing all of the glory that they used to have? Now, are there still other power companies operating during the Monsters, Inc. movie? Or are they all out of business because there's been such a power shortage? If they do still exist, then how do they react to this revelation that laughter energy is more powerful than scaring energy? And if they don't exist, if the Monsters, Inc. company already has a monopoly on the industry, why do they feel the need to advertise themselves? Hmm? Hmm? And what if the school? So we know that there's at least one school who has an entire faculty dedicated to scaring, and the university seems to be completely built around this identity. I mean, I know in the human world, a 700-year-old university wouldn't take too kindly to being rendered obsolete. Keeping in the same vein, are there political ramifications to switching energy sources? I mean, sure, we know that laughter energy is less exploitive and more sustainable, but there's always going to be pushback to new technologies, especially in the energy industry. And furthermore, monsters have spent their entire lives fearing children. It's a huge adjustment, and not all monsters are going to be equally prepared to take on that kind of change. Okay, so now that there's no energy shortage, how are teen monsters going to rebel against their parents? Because typically, after times of scarcity, it's the teenagers that enjoy increased freedom and, a more disposable income. And what are going to be their grievances in this new time? How are they going to be the trendsetters of their era? What happens after Mike Wazowski moves out? Do he and Sully live together out of necessity or convenience? Because Mike seems to appreciate the finer things in life. I don't really buy that he chooses to live in that shabby apartment. When he and Celia move in together, is Sully going to be able to afford an apartment on his own? I mean, sure, he's CEO, but he's also working the front lines, so costs might be pretty tight. What about after, or I guess if, Boo gets older? because we don't really know how time passes in the monster world versus in the human world. There seems to be some suggestion that time passes slower in the human world, given that Boo's parents don't burst through the door at the first sign of their missing daughter, and there's no sign that her room has been investigated in any way. So when he goes back to see her, we don't know how much time has passed. And this is supposed to be a sweet moment, and it's supposed to give you that Disney feeling, but really it just raises a whole lot of questions. If time passes so slowly that it was one night in the human world throughout the course of the movie, then how long did Mike and Sully stay with the abominable snowman? Shouldn't it have been long enough to torture Boo with the scream extractor in the monster universe? And if time passes the same, then what gives Sully's life meaning? And if time passes the same, then what gives Sully's life meaning as Boo grows up and stops believing in him? Does he just completely throw himself into his work for the rest of his life? Let's take a little cat break. And sticking with the abominable snowman for a minute, what happens to the banished monsters? The abominable snowman seems like a nice guy, so why was he actually banished? Was it really male tampering like they seem to suggest in Monsters University? And under whose authority did he even get banished? Does Waternoose hold that authority legitimately, or was he acting rogue? Is there any chance for the monsters to come back? Even if Waternoose was acting with complete authority, wouldn't the revelation of him being corrupt mean that all prior banishments would also need to be reviewed? And if monsters are able to be unbanished, then how does the passage of time affect their reintegration into society? They're basically like prisoners, and we already know in the human world the reintegration system is a mess. Or maybe it's like a Planet of the Apes situation, where when they come back to the monster world, all of their friends and family are dead. And one last question on the topic of time passage. If time does pass slower on Earth, and that would, in theory, extend the life of the monster, wouldn't there be monsters that want to exploit that? I mean, wouldn't somebody like Waternoose just flee to the human world for, a week or so, spend it in the tropics, come back, decades have passed, and he's no longer a fugitive? I mean, he's already pretty corrupt. And I mean, if there are other power companies, they're probably corrupt as well, because how else is Waternoose going to even operate in an industry unless he's operating with a bunch of like-minded individuals? Okay, I think those are all of the questions that I have had plaguing me for years about this movie. If you guys have any answers to the questions, by all means, please let me know in the comments, because I am losing sleep over this. And I hope I don't cause any of you guys to lose sleep over any of this. Unless it's like Matt Pat. Thank you guys so much for watching. YouTube thinks you're going to like this video. I think you're going to like this video. So you can pick which one. But either way, you should definitely click that subscribe button. Okay, thanks. Bye.